Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest back on solo for the first time in a long time. He was actually the very first guest I had on the podcast, and you were the one that got me started on the podcast in general, Jeremiah Bair. I feel like everybody at this point is familiar with him, but he is the head coach at Elevated Coaching Systems, and his business has grown a ton over the last few years, and then even in physique-wise too, man. Really looking forward to just chatting with you and catching up on like training and just things you've been doing in the fitness industry today. But yeah, man, welcome back on.
Thank you, dude. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's crazy. At first, as you were saying off air, I feel like it's been so long since we've done like a just one-on-one episode like this, but also it's crazy to think about. Was that 2020 when you started the show? It's wild to think that it's been like 5 years. It's crazy to think you've been doing this for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Doing the podcast for 5 years now.
And yeah, it's like weird because COVID doesn't seem like it was too long ago, but then you're like, damn, that was freaking 5 years ago already. And it was on the tail end of COVID, the end of 2020
No,
there.
I remember you like talking about on one of our calls, like how I think you and Allie had like just gotten together and like y'all have a kid now. And it's crazy,
Yep.
crazy to think about, honestly.
Yep. Yeah, we did. I think it was like, again, same time, like around November, December of 2020 that we got together. So yeah, funny that all started then.
And that
Um,
was because I was really coaching you through a lot of relationship stuff, right? Like,
you're my,
I'd be
you're
the
my,
worst person to give advice on.
yeah, you were the dating coach. I hired you for the nutrition and training
Oh,
coach. You ended
yeah.
up being the dating coach.
Yeah, my business has really changed. We've really pivoted since 2020. Wasn't having a lot of success in that field.
But yeah, that was episode one. And then I think I had Steve Hall on episode two, which is funny because you're working with Steve again as well,
Yeah.
too. But yeah, man, I guess from a training and nutrition standpoint, what's been going on there? Anything I know, I don't know. I guess you just let people know what you've been working on from that perspective.
Well, absolutely. This is like my favorite thing to talk about. Yeah, so I'm actually not working with Steve anymore. We just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. So really with where I am at, I am like 6 weeks into what I plan to be about an 8 week fat loss phase. My wife and I and a couple friends are going to Portugal, which why I'm getting lean for this trip, I don't know, because it's gonna be like 85 here, it's gonna be like 60 there the entire time. So probably not even gonna take my shirt off, but I don't know. I guess if they like frisk me on the way through or, but yeah. So no, was working with Steve for a good chunk of time there. Always love Steve, great dude, ton of knowledge. So I've talked about this on podcasts on my social media. I'm not sure like how in the loop with all this you are. I know you're a busy dude, so you probably don't really like follow my physique updates. But I started TRT like a year and a half ago. Yeah, a little bit over now actually. So that was the biggest variable in deciding, again, like I love working with Steve, but to wrap things up with that, what I had seen over time is like how your body weight response in a dieting phase and a building phase is so much different, or it is different than before, partially due to just the way you retain water and inflammation from injections, all kinds of fun stuff like that. So that was considering competing. I'm not sure. I go back and forth on it. There's been times where I'm like, yeah, for sure. Then I'm not sure. Still feel pretty small. So that was just basically what I talked through with him, dude. You're an incredible coach. But I want to make sure that if I do decide to go that route, whoever I'm working with has a lot of knowledge in that realm and can really guide me well in that area. And so he's no, absolutely. So I'm currently working with Kyle Baxter. Are you familiar?
That name sounds familiar, but I don't think I'm like super into his content or anything like that. I'll have to look him
Yeah,
up.
Kyle, super cool dude, brilliant guy as well. It's been really cool to learn from him. He was for Prescript for a
Okay.
while, and now he does his own thing. I don't know that they're associated anymore. We're also, our team is also just wrapping up that Prescript certification.
Yeah.
So I also really wanted to work with someone who can teach me how to apply those things. And it has been crazy to me because I think we're on a pretty similar wavelength. Like we've done a lot of the N1 stuff. You and I think both of our like first loves were training, right? Like we love training. Nutrition is cool, but I think we both like really just love the gym first and foremost. And so we've gone very deep on the training side of things. And it has been pretty wild to me to see, even just within a matter of weeks, like again, like there's nothing that I have put more time into learning about or like mastering. And in just like matter of weeks, like just seeing my training, like the things I've been able to tweak were like my PEC training, my lat training specifically, those two, I'm just like, wow, it's crazy how much more I'm getting out of this. So that's been pretty wild. I can keep rambling, but
But yeah, I do have a couple questions actually. So first with the PEC training and the lat training, anything specific there that you feel like's been a game changer or something that you've changed in the last little bit there?
yeah, for sure. It's been very simple. And I could have potentially, like, I remember being at the N1 HQ to do like the biomechanics, like practical. And Adam there telling me a couple times to tuck my elbows when I was pressing a little bit more. an ego thing, honestly, because like with where I'm at, I can like press more with my elbows flared. But he's really had me focus on tucking my elbows a good bit more, like right around 60 degrees. And it is like the load that I can lift, yes, is slightly lower, but it's just so much better of a stimulus. And also, like you can, if you look at or up here and trying to get a stretch on the pec, or basically your shoulders tip forward a lot sooner. Whereas over here, we can get a good stretch. My camera's just freaking out right now.
Yeah.
We can really get a good stretch on the pec, still maintaining a more solid shoulder position. So that's been, again, it's not like that complicated, but basically just tucking my elbows a good bit more when I'm pressing. And then with my lat training, and really it's lat and upper back, like my back training in general, it's just been a lot of keep your sternum more upright. Basically, we need to be in more of this like neutral position for our scaps, our shoulder blades to be able to move best around the rib cage. So for the longest time for me, I was really like, I want to get a really good stretch, right? So everything was almost like in
Yeah.
this more hunched over position, like my upper back was almost more hunched over, just really trying to maximize the stretch. Stopped doing that. And again, it's just more just upright torso, sternum up, chest up. Similarly, not like my head's always like same thing with Katie and I are doing these dance lessons, and he's always like, why is your head like falling to the side like this? My head's always doing stuff like that too. So I have to be very intentional about that. But it is pretty wild, like my shoulder. And again, like I already thought it felt good, but it's oh wow. It feels a lot better still. So that's made quite a big difference. And it's been cool to within the matter of a couple weeks be like, oh wow, that's a huge difference in how that felt when I already thought that felt good and just like how it was supposed to feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Even I feel like for where you're at, it's just like those small little things like that can make a big difference over time, right? It's like you nail down the basics, but for you, it's like now finding those little small tweaks here and there that are just going to be a better stimulus for you. For example, the chest movements, like you said, tucking your elbows in a little bit more. It's just a better stimulus. It sounds like maybe weight's a little bit lower, but it's like the stimulus per rep is a lot higher.
And I'm sure it'll come. I'm sure the weight will come back up.
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about that. Even from like part of it's just it's somewhat novel now, and I'm only like a couple weeks into that. So even from like last this week, like my chest pressing movements are already up. Like we took a big enough jump that I'm like, okay, that's not actually I got that much more jacked this week. It's I can tell this is neurological adaptations based on how quickly it's progressing.
Basically what you're saying there is initially when you change something up, it's like, again, it's more neurological than anything. And so you're going to see those nice little increases right off the bat. And you know that's the case when it jumps up super quick like that there. I'm curious in terms of like training and stuff, just because I know you like to work with different coaches, see their methodology and stuff like that. Are there differences in terms of, because I'm pretty sure the last three people we worked with, Brandon, Steve, Kyle now, is there any differences in terms of the training? If things changed a lot there, or they just go off of what you've been doing in the
Oh,
past?
for sure. No, it's been really interesting. They're all great coaches, all brilliant, and I've taken a ton from each of them. I would say the core principles are very similar. They've all heavy training 5 days a week, upper, lower, push, pull, lower, or like slight variations of that split for the most part. It's not like a night and day difference between any of them. Pretty similar to like how if you put together a program and I put together a program, it would probably look pretty similar. With Kyle, he's a lot less focused on, hey, we're really trying to bias the length and range and really challenge the tissue in the length and range all the time, which I agree with more and more, I would say, for like certain tissues as I've gotten into it. Like I find for even, and I'm not as smart as those guys, so I haven't dug super deep into the research. I feel like I'm more so like I learn from people, apply it, see how it works with clients and myself. But even side delts, for example, I personally find that really trying to bias like the length and range for like a lateral raise just feels like shit to me. I don't feel like I get as good of a stimulus. Even like for my bicep curls, if I am like really everything I'm doing is just trying to bias that length and range, really it's like my elbows just hurt a lot of the time. Kyle's take is more wherever a muscle has the best leverage, thus can generate the most force is probably where we want to bias. But again, it's a little bit more balanced. I would say pretty similar to Brandon. Again, it's not like night and day between any of them. Steve was a little bit more focused on, we really want to focus on the length and range with all these movements. And then let's see, from an intensity perspective, again, I'm only a couple weeks in with Kyle and P picked up in the middle of this fat loss phase. So we have been keeping everything at 1 RIR. Volume is pretty low and basically, okay, let's just avoid that last grindy rep, which initially I was like, I really want to push it further. But then it's been cool to see I have progressed really nicely and body comp, I feel, has improved. His theory on it, if I'm correct, is that because I'm potentially, and we also like bump calories up. So it's been pretty interesting the approach we've taken. And it's weirdly aligned with you like follow Luke Lehman, right? Are you in there like cerebro thing?
Yep.
Brandon has talked about this as well, like the high energy flux stuff. Have you checked like the muscle learners like G flux stuff and like their German body comp type stuff?
He references it a lot. I don't think he's had. I think like one of the first videos I watched, he really talked about the G, like you said, the G flux, the high energy flux type movement and methodology and stuff like that.
Okay, so basically for the listener, it is we're focusing on move more, increase your TDEE, thus we eat more. Hey, in a like in any given phase. So like ideally, we're not in a fat loss phase here initially. We're ramping up your food intake alongside your movement within what's sustainable. And if we can get you eating, whereas before, if your maintenance was 1,500 calories and we had to pull 600 calories for you to lose or whatever it was, if we can get you at 2,200 calories and you're moving more, you're eating more carbs from like a nutrient partitioning perspective, a metabolic health perspective, a training performance perspective, like in general, biofeedback is probably going to be better, but also we're in a better place to pull from for fat loss. So that was something for the last couple months I had been really pushing a lot more with clients and seeing working very well. And pretty similarly, like when I picked up with Kyle, we transitioned from when I wrapped up with Steve, we were at 21 to 2,200 calories daily, like first 4 weeks of my mini cut, just two cardio sessions, 20 minutes each. And I was losing like 3 to 4 pounds a week there. So I was losing at a pretty good clip. Part of that too, I was sick. There was a week of training that I missed, and that was like the like last week before I wrapped up with Steve. So I think that was also, I think I was just more depleted. I think that was part of why like weight was dropping so quickly. But training performance was starting to take a pretty decent hit there. So like when Kyle and I picked up, he bumped my food quite a bit actually. So 2,800 training days, which is 5 days a week, 2,200 on rest days. So immediately felt like a lot more food, but also bumped my cardio up quite significantly. So we started off with 5 days, 25 minutes, heart rate at 135 beats per minute. And now we're at 5 days, 40 minutes, still heart rate at 135 beats per minute. So shifting more towards this move more, eat more approach to fat loss, which has been really cool to see because my training has felt really good. And again, it's hard to say. I was also sick, right? But training has been felt great. It's been progressing very nicely. I've been consistently getting stronger, even on those movements where it's not, okay, this is just neurological gains. And body composition, like the scale hasn't moved, which is interesting. And again, part of his theory on this was, hey, it's multifaceted. First, just coming back from being so depleted, like being sick, time off of training. Not surprised that, hey, there'd be more glycogen stored. Keeping everything at 1 RIR, volume's a little bit lower. Okay, potentially we can better recover. And if these muscle tissues are able to better recover, they'll be able to better store glycogen, apparently. This is new to me, so I may be butchering this, but this is his theory. So thus we're able to store more carbs in the muscle tissue, and that could be part of why weight isn't changing as well. But visually, body composition has improved a lot. I've lost 3/4 of an inch from my navel measurement. My hips have gone down like an inch. Those are the only two that I'm taking, but just in the matter of 2 weeks. And like I can see visually, damn, I am getting quite a bit leaner. But it's funny because the scale, like after dropping so quickly, just really hasn't moved much at all. So that's been interesting because again, that was something I was applying with clients before, but I had like previously in fat loss phases, it was still just like very much scale should be moving along. So that's been really interesting and cool to see. I lost my train of thought past that. There was something else I wanted to say.
So on that though, with the high energy flux, do you think that's something that works better for people in terms of where they're at body fat level wise, or do you think that's something that it could work universally no matter like where you're at?
I honestly am leaning towards these days. If someone's at a higher body fat, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if someone's at a higher body fat, and this is a different, actually, I feel like in the last couple of months, there's a lot of new different things I've been doing. So this is a cool one I haven't really talked about either. If someone's at a higher body fat, I am really focusing on, and again, this was I picked up from Luke. I would definitely check out that G Flux seminar. It's really interesting. They have a module on it in one of their months. But anyways, basically think of like body fat as almost like endogenous food. It's stored on your body, right? So we don't need as much exogenous food. So really for people who are at a higher body fat, what I have been doing is actually, hey, we're not quite as focused on hypertrophy training initially. If you're like, and this is again like higher body fat, I'm talking like, okay, it's probably a male. I would say 25-ish body fat percentage or higher. Female, probably like 5-ish or higher. And we could probably drop that by 5% if we wanted to. But hey, we have a good amount of body fat to lose. I am really initially for those people, hey, let's focus on getting you lean quickly. I want to build muscle, but honestly, like what I have seen is that muscle building, like that physique transformation just goes so much slower if initially we just focus on like hypertrophy and we're going to get there in a year and a half or whatever it is. That really what I've done is typically like I've been pulling those people's carbs. This isn't black and white, but I have a lot of clients I can think of where I pulled their carbs way down, felt surprisingly good there. basically just getting their body better at oxidizing fat. And then rather than spending so much time doing resistance training, hey, maybe we were going to have you, let's say previously you were training like 4 days a week, upper lower. I might actually have you do 3 or 4 cardio sessions, 30, 40 minutes each, zone 2 sessions, right? So heart rate in general, like 130 to 145 beats per minute, let's say. And then even your training, it might actually be like, hey, if we can just maintain during this time. And this isn't like permanent. I've been so far, hey, we're going to push this for a month or two, then we're going to pull back. But even in your training, it's going to be more, hey, are you familiar with the incomplete rest method from N1? Are you familiar?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Or again, like Muscle Nerds calls this German body
Yep.
composition. But basically, we are going to be doing like more back-to-back supersets. There's not going to be like complete rest where really we are basically like the rest periods are much shorter. You're going to be a lot more tired. But the goal there is basically getting down a rabbit hole, but increasing mitochondrial density, which should help your body's ability to lose fat. And then it might just be like, hey, maybe we're doing like a superset of a lower body posterior focus movement, an upper body push, an upper body posterior focus movement, a lower body anterior focus movement with like 45 to 60 seconds rest in between each movement. So again, incomplete rest. That's it as far as training goes. We're just doing that 3 days a week. And maybe we're doing like 30 minutes of cardio, again, zone 2 to finish. So a lot of people is honestly ramping up from doing like, typically in this case, like no cardio to, okay, we're doing probably like 3, 4 hours a week of it at least. But again, less resistance training. And I have really seen that work extremely well, actually, for that. I would say that client in the past is the one that I've struggled with the most in getting things to budge. And I was so like, we got to build muscle. We got to build muscle, right? And that's, hey, it's still in the future. We for sure will. But I do, again, think, hey, if we can get them to a healthier place quicker and strip out body fat first, have more buy-in from that person, but then alongside that, they'll be able to build muscle easier once they get there. So that's been quite different.
And I feel with that too, that's usually, again, I don't know how many people, because I feel like your avatar is a little bit more. It's usually women that are a little bit leaner. They don't necessarily need to do as much cardio, but obviously you see a ton of people like that as well. But I feel like that's really men, right, that are really going to be the kind of prime avatar there for that, right? Where it's, oh,
Yeah,
hey,
men and women for sure. But yeah.
again, it's going to be like, oh, I'm just going to weight train and just keep doing weight training. And it's, again, like you said, getting them doing some cardio and getting things moving is going to be super important. Like you said, at some point you are going to,
I
but
also,
yeah,
though, just one last note on that. I also find that person typically one of their, and I think this is part of why, this is of course multifaceted, but a lot of times when someone has a lot more body fat to lose, part of the issue, part of the reason they're there is typically they don't get a ton of daily movement. They don't get a lot of steps. And in the past, I've always been very much focused on steps, ramping up movement there. But a lot of times it's a schedule thing, it's a lifestyle thing where it is just very hard to get that person to go from 5 to 7K to 12K plus, right? So I've been actually like keeping step goals low, but we're just doing basically like per the time I'd rather than you go for the hour walk, let's go for a 20-minute walk and do a 40-minute cardio session where you're going to burn a lot more calories. We're going to get more of those like zone 2 adaptations in that process, of course, as well. That's been where I've been going with that.
yeah, it's more efficient as well too for people that are, like you said, super busy. So you do feel like you see a lot of women in that position as well too, though.
Yeah, definitely a decent amount. I would say I don't find the cardio bunny stereotype actually. I don't come across a ton of people who are actually doing a whole lot of cardio. I wouldn't say Peloton or hey, maybe I run a couple times a week. But honestly, I find typically when people are start coaching, I used to do that, but I'm not really doing that right now either. So I don't find a whole lot of people honestly doing a ton of cardio, and I don't blame them. But
And then not only that, but even if they are, it's usually not any structure, or it's like they're just half-assing it, or they're just like doing more,
oh
maybe
yeah,
more they think the cardio is like group style class, maybe, right? Where they're just getting their heart
right.
rate up with really no goal or anything like that.
No, absolutely.
You do find that, again, that there is a large chunk of women that need to also focus on the same thing. That would still apply for them, what you were basically saying there. Hey,
Oh,
again, same
most
thing.
definitely. Yeah, I would say very like men and women. I've seen it work so far. I've seen it working very well. I don't have enough. It's only been a few months again that I've been applying this. So I don't have enough time yet to say. Then this is really like the first time I've even like talked about it publicly. But because of that, but so far, I've been really very happy with how things have been moving along for the client. So I'm pushing that into or pushing through that.
Yeah. So again, so I guess to go back to the G flux method again, same. I would assume that that's the same thing then, right? You're still applying the, hey, we want to get that movement up there, and you would.
Yeah.
And does the
And
body
in this
fat?
case, I'm not feeding them more. I'm actually like, typically I'm pulling their calories down quite aggressively for a period of time. And like when I see if someone's been like, oh, I just feel like shit, or when I basically like when someone's biofeedback tells me I've been giving some people refeeds it seems hit or miss. I would say that's more like like I have one client who I'm taking, she's a coach herself, just got in a bad place for a while. She's really strong. She has a lot of muscle tissue. I find for her already, and she can train really hard, even with like short rest periods. I find for her, she actually has needed like refeeds a little bit more frequently than anybody else has. But everyone else, I have been just dieting pretty aggressively, quite low carb actually.
So it does sound then like when you have a little bit higher body fat levels, it's hey, we want to get the movement high, but we can be a bit more aggressive with the calories. Whereas once you get
Right.
leaner,
Okay. I think, yeah, to bring it back to your original question, yeah, which I did not answer. Yeah, I think that like in that place where we're higher body fat, yeah, it just makes sense to bring it down. I wouldn't necessarily be focusing on, hey, let me ramp your calories up as high as you can in most cases. But then once we're down to healthy body fat, we're looking good, pushing your hypertrophy training harder, then I am going to really want to focus on like bringing that energy availability up as well, really ramping your food up alongside that.
because it sounds like that's what you did with your approach was like it was maybe a little bit more
Kind of
aggressive
actually, yeah.
initially, and then now you're eating a bit more and everything.
Yeah. And I like it. I mean, I like an approach like that to fat loss. I feel like it's refined a lot more over time, but I do like for a more experienced client getting pretty aggressive right out of the gate. Let's push hard. Then when we start to see training performance and biofeedback suffer a little bit, which we won't for a couple of weeks. So if I can get like 12, 15 pounds off like I did in 4 weeks rather than it taking 12 weeks, great. But then once we start to see those things suffer, okay, cool. Let's feed you back up. Let's, again, maybe we are moving more and using that to create more of the deficit would also fuel you more so your training's better and things like that.
Well, like it gets more buy-in too, the quicker you can get things moving forward. Unfortunately, right? But at the end of the day, it's just going to get more buy-in as well too to see things get off to a good start there. Just because I feel like a lot of people think that again aggressive dieting is a bad approach, but it's I think most people it doesn't work for a lot of people just because the way they go about it, right? Like they're what does Luke say? It's not it's like a new I don't know how to I can't remember exactly how he calls it, but basically it's a you're nutrient deficient essentially in a lot of these deficits, and that's or
Yeah.
nutrient deficit, and that's usually where people get themselves into trouble when they're trying to be a bit more aggressive with fat loss dieting.
Yeah. No, you definitely have to be intelligent with it. I'm definitely not opposed to it in the right case. It just does. I just do think it varies so much by client. And I find for a lot of still, it's incredibly rare that I'm going to start a client off and tell them we're going to start right out of the gate in fat loss. I may even frame it as a primer phase or something like that. And actually, I'm going to set their macros at what I think might create some fat loss, but let's see how they respond. But I do think that I have very consistently seen I get a lot better outcomes when I don't start someone with a mindset of, okay, week one, I need to see the scale drop. I need to see myself getting
Yeah.
leaner. Because there's so much as like we very rarely know the full picture before we start working with a client. We don't know like how consistent they are, how well they'll nail every variable. We don't know how their body will respond even if they are super consistent. So I just like to set an expectation of we're going to spend a good amount of time probably not losing fat before we get into that phase. And then, oh, surprise, hey, week two, we're already losing. Let's just keep this up. I mean, I'll honestly typically try not to call that a fat loss phase still for as long as I can because I still find like sometimes people like get in their head as soon as you start calling it a fat loss phase when we're like, hey, we're doing this. We literally just doing the same things before, but I've changed what this is called in your tracker.
No, that makes sense, right? It's like I agree with you. It's like not everyone, most people, like you said, probably not a good idea to go straight into a super aggressive diet. Like you want to make sure things are at least in a decent spot before you push that. Because like you said, there's so many things that people can probably work on initially to where if you can get that dialed in, they're almost going to be able to just have more efficient I guess would be the right word to describe it, fat loss and body comp change by getting those things dialed in. Again, you can maybe go over what you try to focus on, or yeah, maybe that's a good thing. What do you try to like focus on initially to make sure that you set somebody up for more efficient fat loss?
Yeah, absolutely. Bases, of course, I want to make sure they're consistently hitting their food targets, which I think is an underrated. It
Oh
is
yeah.
really, even like with coaches, a lot of people like when they'll start working with you, it's, hey, okay, week one, we're not close to our target. So there's a lot of improvement for us here. And I have no idea how your body's going to respond to anything or what like our calorie intake needs to be until we can actually get you consistent with something, your protein intake, etc. Of course, hey, are we doing a good job with hitting our micronutrient needs? I really like for most people to actually start off with a meal plan initially. We're not married to that long term, but initially, I just like to, hey, I want to make sure I know you're hitting your macros, you're well fueled going into your training sessions, we're timing all of your food well. And it's just so much quicker to get all that dialed in if, hey, let me look at what you're doing. Let me build out a meal plan. Let's talk through this. We can tweak it if we need to from there. And let's just follow this as close as we can for the first few weeks. Maybe it's like then the last meal, you just have a calorie range, just eat your calories and your protein here and just track it. And I'm good with that. But then I can ensure we're hitting all that. And even if we just follow that for 4 or 6 weeks, person's really going to have a completely different idea of, okay, what should my food intake look like, my food selection, et cetera. And they'll really use most of what we implemented there and put their own spin on it, but still that'll go well. So I really want to make sure we're hitting our micronutrient needs. And then I am looking at their biofeedback, of course. So like our sleep, is that in a good place? One big one is digestion. At least I see this a lot more with women than like our male clients, but there's a ton of people who have constipation, right? So I wanted to get to the bottom of that. Okay, do we have low stomach acid? And this is going to downstream impact like your ability to absorb these nutrients we need. And a lot of times then it's okay, and our thyroid markers are in a good place, like downstream because of this. So that like typically like fixing digestive issues, almost always that comes up. And I do like to play with calories a little bit, like when this phase, maybe I do want to put someone close to what I estimate to be like a slight deficit at the bottom end of maintenance. And what's happening with their physique? Am I seeing them recomp a little bit? Or is it like, we're really not where I expect us to be? And things still aren't, or we're really like calories are lower than I would necessarily expect us to be at maintenance and we're still not seeing any changes. Okay, cool. Then I know I probably am not in a good place to push this person into fat loss soon. I need to troubleshoot more basically. And then training. Getting their training right is huge. Again, I think another really underrated variable. That is just a ton of reviewing form videos, a lot of telling people to push harder, but also tweaking little things in execution. Because most people who start with us, it's typically, hey, we're already pretty lean. Building muscle to get to the physique you want is just as, if not more important, as you getting leaner. So getting the training is a huge focus there as well. And I really typically will almost frame that initial phase as a body recomposition phase. Will typically, because like when we improve all these things with someone's food selection, their digestion, getting them moving more, they're training better, they're training harder, we will see like their physique tighten up. We will see them build muscle. And so you will be able to see some pretty decent changes even during this phase before we're in a dedicated like fat loss or building phase. But I would say initially, those are the biggest things that I'm looking at. Pretty
Yeah,
similar for you.
yeah, the training, I think the training is a big one too, right? Like you said, that's an easy one there because most people again, maybe it's just not they're training, but it's just they're wasting a lot of time there with that. And then like you said too, I think digestion's a huge one, like you said, where that really impacts everything if that's off. So definitely getting that dialed in is underrated because that will have downstream effects on literally everything that you try to do. So I think that is a huge one to troubleshoot there. But yeah, I think really what you're getting at is I think even because you work with people that obviously they're not newbies to the gym, like they've been training and doing these things for a while. Like I feel like if people have a lot more runway than they think to, like you said, they focus on their sleep, get gut health in check, improve training, like people have this ability to not really have to change their body weight a ton. And they see improvements in terms of their physique. And I feel like that just sets them up for just more efficient body comp change down the line.
Yeah, no, I honestly think for most people, training is, I don't know if it's the most underrated piece of all that. I find it's incredibly rare that someone actually knows how to train well and train hard and has been training well. Surprisingly, especially like this day and age, there's a good amount of information out there on training, right? But I still find it incredibly rare, which is, it's fun. Like it's not a knock towards anyone. And again, even me now, like shit, I've changed and improved a lot in my training just in the last couple of weeks. So we're all there, but I do find that a lot of people start thinking the nutrition is just the thing they need to dial in. And hey, I'm just not sure why I'm not getting to where I want to be. And again, typically what they'll describe is this physique that has a good amount of muscle. And the training is the most important part for that. It's a stimulus. I want to go from here to New Jersey. I don't know why you would want to go to New Jersey to visit Brandon to cruise is
Yeah.
why. Oh no,
Well,
not
not
anymore
anymore.
though.
Not
Not
anymore.
anymore. All right, there's no reason. But
There's no reason.
I'm just giving you a hard time. But it's okay. Your training is the gas pedal to get there, right? Without that, it doesn't matter what we do. Typically, then when we look at that person's training, and with our execution, with our intensity, and with our exercise selection, there's just so much we can typically improve. But it's fun. I love nerding out over all that. And it's cool to see that click with people for the first time where, oh, wow, I actually understand training for the first time, like how to train for this goal and like why I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be. Whereas before I was just like, do I need to do 6 days instead of 5 days? Is that why? Do I need to do 7 days? Or so it's
Sets
really
versus
fun.
10, 12 sets versus
Right.
10. And then on top of what you just said there, just to make it even tougher, it's like you said, it's not anyone's fault, but then it's like also applying that longer than 3 or 4 weeks is also the challenge, right? It's like consistently showing up and pushing that too. And
Yeah.
on top of it, man, it's just such a like slow process as well too. And it's harder to gate. Like it's again, fat loss, most people are going to base it off of where their skill weight's going. That's a little bit more like short term, hey, things are working well. Whereas I feel like building muscle, man, it's just a lot more that goes into it. It's a lot longer and you really just have to continue to apply it for years on end.
Yeah. I find that getting people really focused on their logbooks helps a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, I'll review the logbooks every week. And even like having a movement like a pull-up, for example, where like so many people start. I've been trying to do a pull-up for years. I can't, I've never been able to get it. So I guarantee you within a couple months, you'll be able to do 3 or 4. And if you just program that correctly, if you're relatively lean and you've been training a decent amount, like most people can't get there really quickly. It's more of a skill thing than it is like we need to build a huge amount of muscle tissue to get here. So that's another one that I feel like something like that keeps it exciting, where it's like really focusing on, or similarly though, like pull-ups are a very common one. But if this person's goal is, I really want to build like glutes. Okay, your rear foot elevated split squat is a movement that I'm going to be reviewing. You're already, those are movements I'm going to be reviewing every week for weeks on end. And we're going to be talking about like your PRs, your progressions here. The person starts to get more excited about it. Oh, this is the first time Jeremiah has told me like, good job on this rear foot elevated split squat, or oh, I finally failed on this, and people are excited about it. That really helps as well. But no matter what, yeah, it is. It is for sure a long game. And I think that's just, you have to have fun with it, I think, and realize it's going to take time. But also, if you're doing this because it's, I hate where I'm at, I have to get away from here, you're eventually going to resent it and it's not going to be sustainable anyways. So if we can find, I'm really starting to enjoy training, I'm starting to enjoy like seeing myself get more jacked, whatever it just makes it, I want to be here and I like this, I look forward to it. It just makes it so much more, it just makes it sustainable anyways, versus if it's just, I'm just doing this because I want to go get the transformation.
Yeah, that's part of coaching too, right? You're trying to, especially for something like hypertrophy, it's like you trying to find ways to keep it engaging so people do stay consistent, right? Versus, oh, just keep going. So I think definitely having that. And then, like you said, eventually you connect the dots of, man, I like going in and pushing myself daily. And it's more about that. And then the physique kind of changes, kind of the
Oh
icing on
yeah.
the cake with it. And I think that's a great spot to be. But like you said, I think it takes some time probably for some people to get there. Cause I'm sure you feel this way too, but there's just some days like we've been doing this, like you said, we love training, but there's still some days where it's like, God, I do not want to freaking do that. But you know how you feel afterwards and you know how you would feel if you didn't do it. And that's the thing that leads you to staying consistent and doing it over the long haul.
Oh, for sure.
So I guess one thing that you did bring up that I wasn't aware of was you being on TRT. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more
Oh
about
yeah.
that. What went into your decision making on that? And then, yeah, I'm sure I'll have some follow up questions to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was something I was probably going to do eventually. So with that, so basically where I was at, there was about 3 years there where my testosterone was, and it was just like when I started getting it tested. I had basically seen, I would say like the 3 or 4 years prior, it felt like from a muscle mass perspective, I'd lost a lot. Like I was so far from where I, despite being a lot more dialed in, I was so far from where I was at like 24, which is
Really?
frustrating. Oh yeah. And that's, I would really say the last 3 to 4 months, like when I was like in my early 20s, I don't think I realized this at the time, but I actually think that I had a good bit more, you always feel small, right? But had a good bit more muscle than I realized. So I think that like my training, my numbers and my training now have just again, like in the last few months past where I was then. I wasn't as lean then as I am now. I was around like 240 then. I'm like 220 now. But it is really like just relatively recently, I feel like I've gotten back to or slightly started to surpass like some of my numbers from back then. So it's really interesting. So from that perspective, but just as much it was like my libido, my energy, like I felt like work. I could, and I don't want this to like, I don't want this to be like me pushing people one or the other here. But I also just want to be, I didn't really talk about it for a while, but now that I didn't really share my own physique, I was like, we just basically worked with women. They really share my own physique. So I didn't really see a need to talk about it. But I've started sharing a lot more of what I've been doing. So thus, I want to be a lot more open about it. And I previously was like talking to clients about it and whatnot. But basically, but I don't want this to like persuade, oh, I need to get on
Yeah.
HRT because I'm tired or whatever. But basically, it was like, man, like my libido noticing is so much lower. My energy outside of work where I can get super caffeinated, I can have some nicotine and be focused on that. But then once that's over, I just like by the last like year and a half, I was like, I never feel like doing anything outside of this. I'm just like a zombie on the weekends. And so that's what those last couple of years, that's when I got more interested, started looking at my labs. My total test was consistently like right around 400, which depending on the reference range, I think like technically low is somewhere between 270 and like 300. And then your optimals, supposedly, what is it, like 600 to 1,000, 700 to
Yeah,
1,000?
something up
Varies
there.
a
Yeah.
lot. So that was like relatively low. And then my total testosterone or my free test was for the last like year and a half, it was quite low and it kept every time I got it. It was below even. There's like the optimal reference ranges in the functional health world, which are quite a lot higher than if you went to a doctor. The reference ranges you would get, but then it was even with our standard reference ranges. My free test, which is it's thought that's like where most of your symptoms that's what most of the symptoms
The
will fall. It
free
was like,
test.
where's your free test at? Yeah. That was a good bit lower than the reference range. And I think by the time like I decided to get on HRT, it just kept dropping. And Brandon DeCruz and I worked on this for a good like 6, 8 months before I decided to start. We actually worked on this whole protocol to, okay, what can we do naturally to bring this back up? Can we improve this? And that just kept dropping. And so I was like, all right, honestly, I think long term, like it's something I've considered anyways, like even if it wasn't low, but based on this, I don't know if, and part of it, I think is very much like lifestyle driven, which is funny too, because now I didn't really, and it's hard to say this is a result of like over the last year and a half, I've done a lot of like work with a therapist and a girl who's kind of like a therapist, I don't know, like life coach type thing for me. It was also helpful, but it was my like anxiety, my stress levels were so much higher back then. And I don't know if that was part of the
Yeah.
cause of it
Yeah.
or if that was like, oh, actually, that was because I was also low. So I don't know if it's like a chicken or the egg thing. And it kind of could have become a vicious cycle, honestly. It is funny though, like how much calmer I feel now versus like how I was then. And I don't know, maybe it's just getting older and I don't know. But anyways, so yeah, that was ultimately like what led me to decide to do that.
So basically for you, your free test, just every time you get it checked, it just kept trending down.
Yeah, I think the bottom end of what is it, 11, 12? I think it's the bottom end of the free. If I'm correct, it was like 50% below that. So it
Okay.
was like if it was 12, it was like a 6. So yeah, that was quite low and that just kept trending down. My total was also like slowly trending down, but again, like was really consistently hanging out right around that like 400-ish range.
And so with that, you just were feeling like you said anxiety was higher, stress was high. Again, was the stress causing that, or was that causing the stress? I'm assuming is what you couldn't figure out what was
And I
doing it.
didn't even really think about that stuff, honestly, at the time. That's how I'm wired. It was just like, I just feel fucking tired all the time. And it's specifically like my energy, my libido and then my ability to build muscle were
Yeah.
the biggest things where this is just not so different than how I used to feel. And I know I'm not 22 anymore, but I'm also not that old. Again, maybe very well if I'm going to quit, leave the company and go, I don't know, work at a gas station or something, like maybe I could have changed it, but that also wasn't something I was willing to do.
Yeah, like basically you could have maybe been an employee somewhere, but it's like that wasn't, and that could have dropped a ton of stress. But again, that wasn't in the cards for
Yeah.
you. What were some of the things Brandon had you try to work on naturally?
We did a lot as far as stress management, a lot of work on sleep, which we did improve quite a lot. There's a lot of supplementation. So what we had like a long jack, Tomcat LE. I don't remember as far as like the supplementation model we did, but it was very like, of course, like from a micronutrient perspective, making sure I have everything I possibly need there to support it, and then just measuring over time. It was also very realistic with I know that like you can't or might not be willing to like drastically reduce your workload, for example. Right. So he was very realistic with that side of things as well. But yeah, those were the biggest things, of course, just like making sure I was recovering well in my training. Like after I got lean, making sure that I gained back plenty of body fat, which didn't really seem to go push it one way or the other in my case.
Interesting. And then so you decided, hey, I'm gonna go on it. How's that been like? Was it instant? You noticed the difference, or what? How did?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty good at placeboing myself too. I think like when I take on something, I'm like, I just decide like this is gonna work so well for me. So I did almost feel like I personally almost felt like almost immediately. Again, I don't want this, I don't want everyone to
Of
listen
course,
to
man.
this and just start
Yeah.
injecting themselves. So please talk to your doctor before you inject yourself.
Well, real quick before you go on, I feel like for you, it's important to hear it from you because you're someone that like a lot of people I feel are gonna hear TRT stuff like that and they're just gonna go straight to that, right? Whereas you
Yeah.
worked on a lot of lifestyle stuff. And this kind of reminds me of the conversation I also had with Sal years back when he
Oh
decided
yeah.
to go on TRT and it was like same thing. He's obviously someone who really cares about his health and fitness, and he's not just gonna be like, oh, fuck sleep, whatever, I'm just gonna get on this. And again, it's, hey, you just, some people, you can do everything and it may just be lower, and then like you said, you have the choice to continue there. So obviously, just, I just wanted to throw that in because obviously we know that you're not trying to just be like, hey, go and get on this.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good deal. Yeah. I felt like personally, I very quickly started to notice, like within a couple of days, I felt, wow, I have more energy almost immediately in the gym. Wow, I feel so much better. I can push harder. Again, I don't know how much of that was necessarily placebo because I think it's for the first couple of weeks, you're not really supposed to notice a whole lot of difference. And then it's like from there to like the 6 month point is where you reach the, okay, now we're at like the peak and this is where we maintain. But yeah, dude, it was pretty wild. It has been pretty wild. Like what the last photo shoot that I did with Brandon, I was 170, 177 at the end of that. I'm pretty lean now. I'm 221. That's so like I've regained and again, I think that I'm just now surpassing like where I was when I was like 24 within the last couple of months. But yeah, I have regained a lot of muscle tissue from like a quality of life perspective. Again, the things that I didn't expect were just like actually like feeling so much calmer.
Yeah.
Definitely feel like more confident as well, which again is hard to tease out. Like I have done a lot of work outside of just injecting myself to try to improve those things over the last year or two. And in general, like a lot positive and which again, I don't want to, it's not like this fixes everything. It's hard to tell if that's like a result of this other work I've done or this, but in general, I feel like I'm like in a much better place mentally as well. And like can just calm the fuck down a lot more than I used to be able to, where I felt like I was always like so high strung. So yeah, it's been a very big change. And again, it's been fun to make crazy progress in my training over the last year and a half as well. Again, like I think that I'll send you like I'll just send you my like before and after pictures because it's pretty crazy too how much like that has changed over and it's been a good amount of time now, like a year and a half, but it's pretty crazy like how much things have changed during that time as well. Pretty crazy that I'm still as small as I am with as much progress as I've made during that time, but
I,
here,
I think you look jacked now, man. You've all looked jacked, but again, it's
you don't have
different.
to tell me that, but thank
No,
you.
it's not like you were like small or anything like that. Again, I think when you grow up, when you do what we do and you really love building muscle and stuff like that, you always feel like you're small. You're just never going to be big
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
You're always going to say that about yourself, I feel like. Unless you're maybe like Chris Bumstead or something like that. Then maybe you're like, okay, I'm freaking huge. But I'm sure even he's,
But even his saying to himself is don't be a skinny bitch,
yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly. The worst thing you could say to a guy is you look skinny. But yeah, no, that's super interesting, man. So for you, like big thing is you said you feel more calm, which is interesting because I feel like you would think like a lot of people, the
I know people think
stereotypical,
you get like roid rage and shit like that. Yeah.
but just more. It sounds like more just like I guess maybe less like brain fog throughout the day too. Just feel more energy. You said you don't really feel like a zombie like on the weekends and stuff like that. So just more sustained
I
energy and
would say it's funny, like it's been an interesting thing to like balance because I feel like I get more done now for sure. And I feel like I really enjoy what I do a lot more now than I did. And I love, like, I get to just talk with people about getting jacked and lean and make content about it. And that's like what I get to do. That's dope. Whereas I feel like before, like anxiety and like the scarcity was the driver behind everything that I did. If I don't do this, if I don't create this piece of content and it's not so good, the business is going to fall apart. Or if I don't give this person like the most in-depth reply possible, it's going to fall apart. Whereas I feel like it's like mellowed that out, which sometimes it's like, oh man, like it was scary at first, especially because I actually like, there's not like this urgency to like, I feel like I have to work all the time. And I think I get way more done now. I'm just a lot more efficient and it's just coming from a different place. But it's funny because it does feel it just feels a lot different.
and then training too. Like you said, you just feel like recovery. Is that something that you feel like you've noticed an improvement in,
Yeah,
or
your muscle protein synthesis will be elevated a lot when you introduce like exogenous androgens. And that's if you're like if you're on like testosterone replacement, you don't get like you still, yes, like you still have peaks and valleys, but it is a lot more consistent than if you were not on
yeah,
exogenous testosterone. So that's gonna be part of it. And then even outside of that, like the research on like the dudes, are you familiar with the study where it's like they like gave the people who just sat at home testosterone and they like grew more muscle than the people who like trained for 6 weeks?
I
You know what I'm
have
talking
heard of that.
about?
I don't know the exact study, but I feel like I've heard that study.
And it's also, I'm not like blasting and crazy. I'm not like blasting or anything like that. So of course, like I think the dose is important, but still, yeah, it definitely makes a big difference. I want to show you actually. But anyways, I'm just gonna share my like before and after with you here in a second. But anyways, go. Sorry, definitely don't notice a big difference in training.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, I feel like just recovering, stuff like that, I feel like would be a big thing there. And then you said you're getting it injected and stuff like that. Is like a weekly thing, or what's the frequency on that?
I do it 3 times a week. Just
Do you,
basically, I'm someone who tend to convert more to estrogen. Basically, less peaks should, in theory, equal less conversion to estrogen. Basically, I do it a little bit more frequently.
you have to do it more frequently, where someone that didn't do that, they could do it less frequently because the peaks aren't a huge deal and it can last a bit longer, whereas you have to do it more frequently because you don't want to get those massive peaks at
For
any one
sure,
time.
sure. And injecting myself is definitely, my wife does it for me most of the time because I'm
Yeah.
terrible with needles. I'm trying to get better at that. That, and of course, now I do very much stay on top of my blood work and like get that done every 3 to 6 months. And that's,
Yeah.
I've really had to work on that because did you ever give plasma like in
I never
college?
did. No.
Okay. That's like what I used to do in college too. I don't know why I didn't just get a job, but that's like how I would buy pre-workout and alcohol basically as I would donate plasma.
At
Those
the
big
time.
ass needles, they
Yep.
would just sit in your vein for like an hour. They pull it out, then they like put, what is it? It's part of the blood that whatever's left after they take out the plasma, they like put back in there and you can feel it go back in your veins all cold. That's just burned in my brain. So I have a really like weird thing with needles since then. So that has definitely been, but we're getting through it. I feel like a good like year and a half and now I'm in a better place.
What did it take a little bit of time to get that dialed in, the frequency and dosage and stuff like that?
No, not really, honestly. It was pretty, I had someone guiding me through all that process. And that was like something that was very helpful for me as well, as having someone who could talk me through all that. Hey,
Yeah.
we're looking for here because that is for sure something I think you've learned a lot in like the functional health side of things over the last couple of years. We have as well, where that is for sure a lot of like HRT clinics that I've seen is, or even just people going to their doctors. And it's like we had a client who her doctor just started her 150 milligrams a week. She had low testosterone, which is like that's like where men would typically, I started at 140 a week. Now, like women are going to be much more sensitive to like the androgens as a whole, but also that would be like, that's an
Yeah.
insanely high dose. But like how this happened, I don't know. Now, that's not, thankfully, that's not super common, but I find like a lot of times, like even people working with like HRT clinic, they're not super on top of, hey, let's make sure we got your labs done. Let's look at where your levels are after X amount of time. So, like for me, it was really helpful to have someone guiding me through, all right, hey, here's what we're looking for. Let's make sure we're breaking down like these lab markers consistently, et cetera. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Having somebody guide you just again, make sure it's optimal for you. Is there anything that you've needed to watch specifically on your blood work?
I mean, like my hematocrit get a little bit high, so like I donate blood, and that's like for what I've specifically been watching, or what anyone in general should be watching.
Gotcha.
One or the other there.
Say what?
Are you asking like what I specifically should be watching or
Yeah.
what someone? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Either you could take it both ways, right? Like yeah, what you watch specifically. Is there anything that you've had to watch or see change since doing it? And then, yeah, is there anything specific that people need to watch? Or maybe it's both. Maybe that answers both of them.
My testosterone levels are going way up, so that's been a big.
Hopefully.
No, really, the biggest thing I had to just keep an eye on is hematocrit,
Okay.
and just again making sure that's in a reasonable place. I donate blood. I do a good amount of cardio. But Pat watching my lipids as well. But really, everything there for me has really, my lifestyle's in a good place. So everything there has stayed in a really very good place.
Cool, man. I don't have any. I feel like we dove into where you're at. A ton of great information in here. I feel like we also dove in a little bit to practical applications for people listening in terms of fat loss, stuff like that. Yeah, man. It was fun chatting with you again. Ton of great information in here. I feel like at this point, anyone that's listening to this podcast is familiar with you. But in case they're not, if you want to let them know where they can find you and anything you have coming out on your end soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our podcast. It is Living Lean. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, Jeff has been on there many times. You can follow me on Instagram
Real
at
quick.
Jeremiah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Do you still have guests on your podcast? Do you still do guests?
Not very often
I didn't
anymore.
think so.
No, we can for sure talk about that off air if you want to,
Yeah.
though.
Yep.
No, but yeah, not very often anymore. But yeah, Living Lean. I do reshare our episodes, however, like anytime we do a coaches roundtable. You can find me there on Instagram at Jeremiah Bair, Bair. Our team page is Elevated Coaching Systems at Elevated Coaching Systems. And those are probably the best ways to find us. Yeah, any questions you have, reach out. If you have TRT drug related questions, stuff like that, I'm going to refer you to someone smarter than myself. But yeah, I'm happy to chat and answer whatever anyone has. So feel free to hit me up.
Yeah, that's probably the only downside of bringing it up is people now are going to be asking you more
That
about
has
that.
been my one concern with talking about it a little bit more, is because I want to really I love being able to talk about what I'm up to. And again, I really just wasn't for a long time. I was like, I'm not the face of the company. I don't want to be the face of the company. Like it's about the clients, the other coaches. But I've really had a lot of fun like talking about what I'm doing. But then I felt like there was like a block where I like couldn't, because I feel like I like need to talk about this. But I know like I've heard Aaron Straker mention like, okay, once I started talking about this, now everyone just asks me about like testosterone related questions. And that's like, I'm not the best person to advise there. So I want to put that out there. But yeah,
Well, again, appreciate your time. Everyone knows where to find you. We'll make sure we put those in the show notes, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
cool. Talk to you soon. Thanks for having me.